outside of that, there's a whole realm of what I would call machining marks that exist all over these sites in Egypt. There's a place called Abu Sir that's been closed to the public for more than 100 years. You have to get special permission to go there. It's one of my favorite sites. It's an old kingdom site, like 5th dynasty. And all over this site, you find amazing evidence for massive circular saws. You see machining marks. There are these tube drills. I've got like an hour-long documentary just on the tube drills because there's been an argument going on for 150 years about the tube drills. There is evidence for very sophisticated and powerful tools that is etched into these artifacts from the very earliest points in Egypt all over the place. And a lot of these things, they disappear in later periods of time.
Go back to that image, Jamie, that you just had. Look at that.
Yeah, so here's an example. I didn't send you any of the machining marks, but I can show them to you at some point. Yeah, so you find the tube drills are really interesting because it's a very thin tool, and what they would do, they range in size from like a 1/2 inch up to 9 inches.
And are those plugs that were removed from the stone?
So it's like a hollow tool that gets cut down, and then you snap off the core. And now Flinders Petrie, he was you familiar with Petrie? He was around like late 1800s, early 1900s. I use his work a lot in the stuff that I do because he was the first guy to apply engineering principles to what we saw, which is kind of this meta point that messes with my head a bit in that it took our civilization up to the industrial age to even be able to put some of this stuff into context. Like anyone else that looked at this stuff before we understood what machining was, what working in this stone was, what it looks like to cut stone with a circular saw, you don't have the context to explain it. So we had to get to the industrial age and develop sort of mass manufacture and engineering for us to even recognize what we're seeing here. Wow. So he found there's a famous core. It's called Petrie's Core Number 7, and it's a drill core from one of these holes. It's in granite, and it's located in the Petrie Museum. And this museum is one that actually allows research appointments, and you can analyze it. And it's been analyzed several times. There's been an argument that's been going on for literally 150 years about this core because what Petrie found and what Chris Dunn later verified. Yeah, that's Petrie's Core Number 7, exactly right there. That in fact might even be Chris Dunn's photo. Those that groove that goes around it, very obvious striations, right? Mm-hmm. So it's been incontrovertibly shown that that's a spiral. It's a spiral. So it's not like just horizontal striation. So if you can imagine the way we do it today, we have tube drills and core drills, spins really fast, makes lots of little marks. There's been studies done looking at those sort of marks. That's not what we're seeing here. What we see here is a continuous spiral groove of at least 2 points. So it's a twin spiral that runs down the length of the core. Now, from that and analyzing that, you can determine a few things. Things like how fast was this drill, or how quickly was this drill penetrating the granite. And Petrie and Dunn both analyzed it and looked at it. Well, it's about a 1 in 60 rate. So for each, say, 60 inches of horizontal travel, it's going 1 inch into the stone. So imagine that. So if you take a spiral and straighten it out, and you just imagine, all right, 60 inches this way, you're getting 1 inch of vertical travel. That figure is 500 times greater than we can achieve today in terms of how fast it penetrates the granite.
500 times greater.
Now, it doesn't mean it cut quicker. It could have been moving slowly, like it might have been turning slowly.
Right.
But it's penetrating the granite at a rate far greater than what we can achieve with our technology today.
This is why it's so important to bring outside eyes into this, whether it's an aerospace engineer. Like this is, going back to Troy, that was discovered by a businessman. He wasn't an archaeologist. That's something that most people don't know. It's like when you bring an outside set of eyes with different sets of experiences, they'll pick up on things that others wouldn't.
Look at that image, that all the spiral lines around that. That's just amazing.
Yeah, so you can go there, and I intend to do this. I might be in the UK this year, and I intend to do that. It's called the cotton wrap test. You can actually, under a little microscope, run a piece of cotton through that groove. Now they actually took it a step further, and they made a latex molding of it, right? And so then they sent it to Chris Dunn. The Petrie Museum did this, and then he cut reference holes in it, cut it out, and then geometrically proved basically that this is a spiral groove. Like it starts above the line and ends below the line. He showed that that's it. And what I would love to see happen is we could get this core and then scan it with that structured light scanner, because it will put that stuff to bed. No problem. Like there's, as far as I'm concerned, this is a spiral groove. The case has been closed, but people still argue the point. But it's 100% an indicator of some form of technology that's far away beyond the primitive stuff that we attribute to the dynastic Egyptians. So to me, it's an indicator that, and I don't think the dynastic Egyptians, they don't describe having this type of capability. We've never found any tools from them that can do this type of thing. So I think what we're looking at here with dynastic Egypt is a story. It's a longer timeline. It's a story of inheritance. I think they inherited a lot of artifacts, potentially some architecture, potentially like parts of the pyramids or that type of thing. And then that's where their culture grew from that. I mean, they themselves describe their history as going back nearly 40,000 years. Like it's way, they themselves look at themselves, they look at them like a legacy culture. They, you know, this is in the Palermo stone, it's in the Turin papyrus, the priest Manetho talks about it. There's a lot of different, so that actual, the yellow image in the center, that's the latex core, no, up to the right, that one. That's the latex core, the latex molding of core number 7. But the crazy thing is too, this is the only core that's really been analyzed. Like these things, they're all over the place. Like lots of museums have them. I'd love to see a body of work be built up with true analysis of it because...
Do they all have similar markings on them?
Well, yes. And so you can see the holes on a lot of the sites that seem to have a very clear striation on them. Some of the tubes, the actual drill cores, if you like, seem to have it that way. There were other techniques used. So the argument that how the mainstream archaeologists describe them solving this problem is they had a copper tube and they got sand and they put a rock on top of the tube and a bow drill and they just went back and forth with this. And they did some experiments and grinding works ultimately because sand has little chunks of like quartz and corundum in it, but it takes days and days and days to cut this much.
Right.
And the markings and the machining doesn't look anything like what you see in the ancient examples. And what's more, and what's kind of interesting here is that the drill cores that they found, they're tapered. So they taper in like this. The holes are straight, the cores are tapered. So it means that the tool itself must have had almost like a cone shape. And the thing that, because some people say, well, those lines could have been created when the tool was removed. And I'm like, no. If you think about a tapered tool like this, the second you take any pressure off it, the whole tool removes itself from the surface of the stone. So those marks can't be made by withdrawal of the tool. It's 100% something going on. And Petrie, back in the late 1800s, was scratching his head looking at this stuff, and he goes, there must have been a weight of 2 or 3 tons on one. Like he sort of said it was a jeweled tube of bronze that did this. But he was looking at it. He knew a mystery when he saw it, and he couldn't explain it.
What's the speculation?